The moment you step onto the surface, your life expectancy drops to roughly 30 minutes, and that's if the machines don't spot you, if another desperate scavenger doesn't put a bullet in your back, if an electromagnetic storm doesn't turn you into a charred reminder of human fragility, and if you somehow manage to drag your loot-heavy body to an extraction point before your lungs give out from pure exhaustion. Welcome to the world of Ark Raiders, where Earth stopped being home and started being a graveyard. This isn't your typical post-apocalyptic playground where you can leisurely explore ruins and maybe fight off a few zombies. No, this is a world where humanity clings to existence deep underground, where the surface belongs to intelligent machines that hunt with cold precision, and where the few brave or foolish enough to venture topside do so knowing that survival isn't likely. It's a gamble. Every single time. Picture this scenario. You're a raider, part explorer, part junkie, part maniac, as the lore describes. You've just taken the gravity lift from Speranza, the underground neighborhood that serves as humanity's last bastion in what used to be Toledo, Italy. The lift deposits you on the surface in a region called the Rust Belt, a sprawling wasteland of ruins, swamps, and industrial decay. The year is somewhere around 2180, generations after a global environmental collapse wiped out most of human civilization, and decades after mysterious machines called Ark began falling from the sky to finish what nature started. You have exactly 30 minutes to scavenge whatever resources you can find, avoid or destroy the Ark machines that patrol every inch of the surface, potentially cooperate with or murder other raiders who are just as desperate as you are, and then make it to an extraction point before time runs out or something kills you. If you die, you lose almost everything you were carrying. All your hard-earned loot, your carefully crafted weapons, your equipment, gone. Return to Speranza empty-handed and empty-hearted, forced to start over with scraps. But dying isn't even the worst part. The worst part is everything that can kill you before you even have a chance to fight back. Let me paint the full picture of why you, yes you specifically, wouldn't survive a single day in this hellscape. Let's start at the beginning, because understanding why Earth became this way helps you grasp just how utterly hostile the environment truly is. Generations before you were born, Earth experienced something called the collapse. This wasn't a single catastrophic event like a meteor strike or nuclear war. Instead, it was a slow-motion apocalypse, a cascading series of environmental disasters that compounded into planetary devastation. The collapse involved massive earthquakes that reshaped entire continents. Uncontrollable wildfires consumed forests and cities alike, turning breathable air into toxic smoke. Catastrophic flooding submerged coastal regions as ice caps melted and sea levels rose dramatically. The atmosphere itself became polluted beyond recognition, making the surface barely habitable even before the machines arrived. We're talking about an Earth where the sky itself looks wrong, where the air burns your lungs if you're not careful, where water sources are contaminated and vegetation struggles to grow in poisoned soil. What caused the collapse? The game's lore suggests it was the inevitable result of unchecked climate change and environmental exploitation. Humanity pushed Earth to its breaking point, and Earth pushed back violently. The planet that had nurtured human civilization for millennia became actively hostile to human life. Cities crumbled, supply chains collapsed, governments failed, billions died in the chaos that followed. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. When it became clear that Earth was dying, humanity split into two groups. The first group consisted of the wealthy elite, the powerful, the connected, those with the resources and political clout to secure passage on spacecraft. These privileged few, sometimes referred to in the lore as the Exodus humans, boarded advanced rockets and fled Earth entirely, leaving the dying planet behind in search of new worlds or space stations where they could continue their comfortable existence. The game describes them with bitter irony as valorous survivors. The second group, everyone else, the billions of ordinary people who were simply left behind to die on a planet that no longer wanted them. These abandoned masses became the ancestors of the raiders, struggling to survive in the harshest conditions imaginable with no hope of rescue. no expectation that things would ever get better. They lived in the ruins of pre-collapse civilization, scavenging what they could, forming makeshift communities in whatever habitable land remained. And just when humanity thought things couldn't possibly get worse, just when some degree of civilization was beginning to return to these scattered survivors, crude machines started falling from the skies. The first wave of ARC machines arrived without warning, without negotiation, without any apparent motive beyond destruction. These early models were less sophisticated than the ones that plagued the Rust Belt today, but they were still lethal enough to nearly wipe out what remained of humanity. Picture swarms of flying drones, rolling death spheres, and multi-legged walkers descending on fragile human settlements like locusts, methodically hunting down every living person they could detect. For a decade, survivors fought back desperately. Raiders formed organized resistance, establishing strongholds like the Alcantara power plant, which you now know as the Dam Battlegrounds. They learned to fight these machines, discovered weak points, developed tactics. The conflict culminated in something called the Battle of Victory Ridge, where raiders assembled in one last desperate stand to drive back the remaining first-wave machines. And incredibly, they succeeded. The machines were pushed back. Humanity won a temporary reprieve. For roughly 20 to 30 years, there was fragile peace. Survivors rebuilt what they could. They established underground cities in old subway systems, collapsed buildings and tunnel networks. They learned to grow food in artificial conditions, to recycle water, to make do with increasingly scarce resources. Hope, that dangerous emotion, began to creep back into the human psyche. Maybe the worst was over. Maybe humanity had a future after all. Then, the second wave arrived, and any hope died screaming. The second wave of ARC machines was everything the first wave was, but exponentially worse. These weren't crude prototypes anymore. These were refined, intelligent, adaptive killing machines. They came in greater numbers with better technology and what appears to be strategic coordination. They didn't just attack and retreat like their predecessors. They conquered. They claimed the surface completely and permanently. This new, overwhelming force made the topside utterly inhospitable. The few remaining surface settlements were annihilated. Raiders who tried to hold the line were hunted to extinction. Any human presence detected on the surface was eliminated with cold efficiency. The second wave didn't just control the surface, it owned it absolutely. Humanity had no choice but to abandon their remaining topside positions and retreat fully underground into sunken cities and tube networks, establishing places like Toledo and Speranza to survive in the darkness. This is where your story begins. This is the world you would try to survive in. You live underground in Speranza, the oldest neighborhood of the underground city of Toledo. The name means hope in Italian, which is either deeply ironic or desperately optimistic, depending on your perspective. Speranza was originally established as an independent settlement at the start of the second wave, when ARC's return forced settlers underground, built into subterranean infrastructure and buildings that had been swallowed by the earth during the collapse. Life in Speranza is colorful and lively on the surface, at least compared to the desolate hellscape above. There are traders like Celeste, the founder of Speranza, and a veteran of the first wave who lost her parents at a young age and learned to survive through pure resourcefulness. There's Apollo, the traveling mechanic who fixes whatever raiders need fixing. Lance, an eccentric android medic who suffers from amnesia and desperately tries to fit in among humans. Shawnee, who trades in seeds rather than cash because fresh food is precious beyond measure underground. Tian Wen, the reclusive gunsmith who crafts weapons through a peephole in her door and whom nobody remembers arriving. These people form the heart of your community. They give you quests, trade with you, provide the services that keep raiders operational. But underneath the bustling market atmosphere and the attempts at normalcy, there's a grim reality that everyone understands but rarely speaks about. Resources are limited. Conflicts are endless. Competition for survival is fierce. Every raider who goes topside risks their life not just for personal gain, but to support the entire community of Speranza. The materials you scavenge, the technology you recover, the food you bring back, these things keep everyone alive. There's immense pressure on you to succeed, to extract with valuable loot, to not come back empty-handed. Because every failed run, every death on the surface, every lost piece of equipment represents wasted resources that the community can't afford to lose. And this brings us to the central horror of your existence. To survive underground, you must repeatedly venture onto a surface that actively tries to kill you. You must risk everything, again and again, in the slim hope that this run will be the one where you strike it rich, where you find that rare blueprint or valuable component that makes the danger worthwhile. You must gamble your life every single day because the alternative is slow starvation in the darkness below. So let's talk about what awaits you topside. Let's discuss the various categories of things that will absolutely murder you the moment you set foot in the Rust Belt. First and foremost, there are the ARC machines themselves. These autonomous robotic combatants come in a horrifying variety of shapes and sizes, each designed for specific lethal purposes. The game groups them into rough threat categories, but make no mistake, even the weakest ARC can kill you if you're not careful. Let's start with the smaller threats and work our way up to the nightmare fuel. Ticks are spider-like enemies that roam the interior rooms of buildings. They're quick, agile, and if not killed promptly, they'll jump on you and attach themselves to your body, dealing continuous damage while you frantically try to throw them off. They're irritating little nightmares, but they move so fast that shooting them is genuinely challenging. Most experienced raiders resort to melee weapons for one-hit kills, but that requires getting dangerously close to something that can latch onto your face. Wasps are fast-flying drones armed with machine guns that provide aerial suppression. Think of them as the basic aerial threat. They scan their surroundings with that distinctive propeller sound, and once they lock onto you, they open fire with sustained bursts that rapidly chip away at your shields and health. Their weak points are the two thrusters on their chassis. Destroy those and the wasp drops, but hitting moving targets while under fire requires steady aim and calm nerves, neither of which you'll have in the moment. Rollbots are exactly what they sound like, large rolling spheres that patrol the map collecting data. When they sense you, they accelerate directly toward your position like a boulder gaining momentum downhill. Getting hit by a rollbot at full speed is devastating, capable of crushing you outright. The good news is they're easy to dodge if you see them coming. The bad news is they often come from directions you're not watching, and the Rust Belt is full of blind corners and visual obstructions. Snitches might be the most annoying non-lethal enemy in the entire game. These flying scout drones patrol at high altitude searching for raiders. They don't directly engage in combat, but when they spot you, they broadcast your location to every ARC unit in the vicinity and potentially alert other raiders to your presence. Killing a snitch quickly is essential if you want to maintain any element of surprise or stealth, but their elevated position makes them tricky targets, and the noise of shooting them down defeats the purpose of stealth anyway. Now, let's graduate to the mid-tier threats, the enemies that will absolutely ruin your day if you're not prepared. Hornets are the armored, more dangerous version of wasps. They fire slow-moving stun projectiles that temporarily disable your weapons and movement if they connect. Being stunned in ARC raiders is essentially a death sentence. You're completely vulnerable, unable to defend yourself, unable to run. Other enemies will take advantage of your helpless state, and if other raiders are nearby, you're an easy kill. The Hornet's front thrusters are armored, so you must target the unarmored rear thrusters, which means getting behind it while it's actively shooting at you. Turrets are stationary defense units found throughout ARC zones, equipped with either machine guns or sniper rifles. They scan rooms with blue light that turns red once they lock onto you. If caught in their line of sight while they are aware of you, expect a continuous stream of bullets that tears through shields and health with no remorse. The ideal strategy is sneaking up to destroy their power cores, but turrets are extremely tanky and drain ammunition fast. Most experienced raiders just avoid them entirely when possible. Sentinels are medium-sized mobile units that provide area control. They're durable, hit hard, and tend to patrol high-value loot locations, meaning you often can't avoid fighting them if you want the good stuff. Taking down a sentinel requires sustained fire, good positioning, and usually more ammunition than you want to spend on a single enemy. Bisons are four-legged robots that move faster than bastions and feature a lethal jump attack. They can close distance rapidly, launch themselves at your position, and release a powerful wave attack that finishes raiders in seconds. Fighting a bison requires constant movement and excellent spatial awareness, or it will simply overwhelm you with speed and aggression. But these mid-tier enemies, they're just the warm-up act. Now we need to discuss the elite killers, the ARC units that solo raiders avoid, and even full squads approach with extreme caution. Rocketeers are heavily armed aerial units that launch guided missiles from extreme range. They're among the toughest aerial enemies in the game, capable of devastating entire squads caught in open terrain. The missiles track your movement, forcing you to stay in cover and time your movements between volleys. The only reliable way to damage a Rocketeer is targeting the glowing red core underneath its chassis or destroying its thrusters, but both require exposing yourself to its missile barrage. The lock-on warning sound becomes a source of pure dread once you've been hit a few times. That audio cue means you have seconds to break line of sight or prepare to get blown apart. Bastions are massive eight-legged ground units designed to suppress and dominate battlefields. They move slowly, but have devastating firepower, mounting machine guns that lay down continuous suppressive fire, forcing you into cover and keeping you pinned. Their armor plating can withstand most standard weapons, meaning you must target specific weak points like the glowing yellow kneecaps and the yellow cylinder on their back. The problem is that bastions are designed to keep you in front of them where their armor is strongest. Getting behind one requires teamwork, distraction, or suicidal levels of aggression. Some bastion variants deploy spotter drones that mark targets for artillery strikes, adding another layer of lethality. Lippers are aggressive close-range units that, as the name suggests, leap at their targets with terrifying speed. Once a leaper jumps, it cannot change direction mid-air, which is your only real advantage. You must time your sideways movement perfectly, because if it lands on you, you're taking massive damage. The glowing eye is the weak point, requiring sustained fire and stun effects when available to create damage windows. Fighting a leper feels like a horror movie boss encounter where one mistake ends your run. And then there are the true bosses, the ARC units that define the high-end PvE experience. The Queen is the most iconic boss encounter. She's a towering mechanical nightmare that requires coordinated team efforts to take down. Solo raiders don't fight queens, they run from them. The Queen represents everything terrifying about ARC in concentrated form: massive size, devastating weapons, intelligent behavior patterns, and the ability to call reinforcements. Even well-equipped three-player squads struggle against Queens. The reward for taking one down is substantial rare components and high-tier loot, but the risk of losing everything trying is equally substantial. The Matriarch and Shredder are newer additions to the ARC army, each bringing unique mechanics and heightened difficulty. The community is still learning optimal strategies for these encounters, which means early attempts often end in spectacular failure and lost gear. But here's what makes ARC machines truly terrifying beyond their individual capabilities. They operate with behavior stages based on detection. Each machine has a scanner that emits different colored light. Blue means the ARC is patrolling with no target, just going about its programmed route. Yellow indicates the ARC is alerted to your presence, it heard something, detected movement, knows something is wrong but hasn't confirmed your exact position. Red means the ARC has found you and is engaging in active combat. The transition from blue to red can be instantaneous if you shoot first, but it can also be gradual if you're trying to sneak past. The problem is that ARC scanners operate within a 45-degree vision cone, narrow enough that you might think you're safe, wide enough that you're probably not. Most ARC units can't hear you unless you're practically on top of them, with the notable exception of snitches, which have enhanced audio detection. This creates a constant tension where you're trying to gauge detection ranges, predict patrol patterns, and calculate whether you can sneak past or should just fight. And ARC machines don't just patrol randomly, they're often positioned to guard high-value loot locations, to control choke points, to cut off escape routes. Someone or something programmed them with strategic placement. They work as an ecosystem, with scouts like snitches feeding information to combat units, with artillery bastions using spotter drones for targeting, with flying units providing overwatch while ground units push forward. Fighting ARC isn't just about shooting robots. It's about outthinking a distributed intelligence network that wants you dead. Now let's talk about where these delightful murder machines hunt you. The Rust Belt is divided into several distinct locations, each with unique geography, environmental hazards, and ARC concentrations. The Dam Battlegrounds, also known as the Alcantara Power Plant, was once a crucial Raider stronghold during the closing battles of the First Wave. It's a mix of forests, swamps, old research centers, and apartment buildings. The landscape is toxic and waterlogged, a testament to the ecological devastation of the collapse. Even now, these lands remain a hotspot for ARC skirmishes. The dam is generally considered the safest place for new raiders to learn the ropes, which tells you everything about how dangerous the other locations are. The swamps limit mobility, the forests provide cover, but also concealment for ambushes, and the old research facilities are mazes of rooms where ticks nest and turrets guard valuable loot. The buried city is a pre-collapse urban area now almost completely covered in sand dunes. Walking through the buried city feels like archaeology in reverse, exploring the remnants of how humans lived before everything fell apart. You can search hospitals, malls, town squares, and apartment buildings, all half buried under desert sand. The narrow streets favor stealth and close-range combat, making shotguns particularly effective. But those narrow streets also mean limited escape routes. If you encounter another Raider squad or trigger multiple ARC units in the tight corridors, you can find yourself surrounded with nowhere to run. The buried city is highly centralized, meaning player spawns are common in the region. Expect early PvP encounters and moderate ARC presence. The Acera spaceport is where the story comes full circle. This is where the Exodus shuttles, those vessels of hope and desperation, once roared into the heavens carrying Earth's elite to safety while leaving everyone else behind. Now it's a derelict launch facility filled with old, forgotten technology. The spaceport is a massive vertical combat zone with control towers and elevated platforms. The launch towers contain some of the densest, highest-tier loot in the game, but the exposure makes this one of the most dangerous maps for beginners. Everything is open, everything has sight lines, everything leaves you vulnerable. Raiders camp the good loot spots. ARC patrols the towers methodically. One wrong move, and you're taking fire from multiple angles with minimal cover. The Blue Gate is a location higher in the mountains, featuring open areas, small towns, tunnels, and underground complexes. The map name refers to what was once a steadfast symbol of defiant connection, but now serves as a daunting entryway into perilous mountain ranges. The surrounding valley bears scars both new and old, evidence of battles fought and lost. The extreme elevation changes reward vertical awareness. You need to use cliffs for overwatch, but also watch for enemies above you. Stamina management becomes critical when constantly climbing. Run out of stamina mid-climb and you're a sitting duck. There are also rumors of a place called Stella Montis, but its exact nature and how to access it remains shrouded in mystery. The community speculates it's tied to a special event or hidden unlock condition. Whatever it is, you can bet it's even more dangerous than the locations you already know about. But the maps themselves aren't just static playgrounds. They feature dynamic conditions that alter gameplay in terrifying ways. Let's discuss the environmental hazards that kill you just as effectively as any machine. Electromagnetic storms represent some of the most chaotic conditions you can encounter. When an electromagnetic storm hits a map, lightning strikes tear through the environment continuously. These aren't just visual effects. Lightning deals massive damage to anything it hits, raiders and ARC alike. The ground sparks and crackles before a strike, giving you a few seconds warning to get clear, but in the middle of combat or while navigating difficult terrain, those few seconds aren't enough. You're constantly scanning for lightning markers, calculating safe zones, trying not to stand in open areas where you're an easy target for nature's wrath. The storms also close certain extraction points, limiting your escape options. Raider hatches, normally a safer extraction method if you have a key, simply don't function during electromagnetic storms. This funnels all surviving raiders toward the remaining standard extractions, creating brutal choke points where PvP encounters become almost inevitable. Other raiders know you have to extract through one of the few remaining points, so they camp and wait. But the storms aren't purely negative. Lightning can stun or temporarily disable ARC machines if you're clever enough to lure them into strike zones. This creates risk-reward scenarios where you're using the environment as a weapon, but you're also risking instant death if you miscalculate. The reduced visibility and constant thunder also mask footsteps and gunfire, making stealth somewhat easier, but also meaning you might not hear enemies approaching until they're right on top of you. Night raids transform maps into tense survival horror experiences. When night falls over locations like the Blue Gate, visibility drops dramatically. ARC enemies become more aggressive and numerous. The machines seem to hunt more effectively in darkness, their scanners cutting through the gloom like searchlights. Other raiders are deadlier too, because ambushes are easier to set up and harder to detect. Everyone moves more cautiously, which ironically makes encounters more violent when they happen, because surprise is total. The reward for surviving night raids is significantly better loot. Rarity increases across the board. Locked areas have higher chances of containing valuable blueprints. Keycards spawn more frequently. The game is explicitly telling you that higher risk equals better rewards, but it's not kidding about the risk part. Night raids offer double trials points, making them essential for weekly progression, but the difficulty spike is substantial. Many raiders avoid night raids entirely, preferring multiple safer runs over one high-stakes nightmare run. Other map conditions include harvest season, which offers higher yields of natural resources like food items scattered across the map. Hidden bunkers appear under specific conditions, requiring you to activate antennas or complete objectives to access underground chambers filled with high-tier loot. Lush blooms increase plant-based crafting material spawns. Each condition changes how you approach the map, what you prioritize, where you go. And let me emphasize something about the Rust Belt's baseline environmental hostility. The air itself is questionable quality. The lore mentions that the atmospheric pollution from the collapse never fully cleared. Water sources are contaminated, the soil is poisoned. This isn't stated as an active gameplay mechanic, but it's part of the atmospheric dread. You're breathing bad air, drinking questionable water, eating food grown in hydroponic facilities underground, because nothing grows properly on the surface anymore. Long-term exposure to topside conditions is probably shortening your lifespan even on runs where nothing actively tries to kill you. But let's be honest, environmental hazards and robot enemies, as terrifying as they are, aren't even the most dangerous thing you face topside. That distinction belongs to other players. ARC Raiders features PvP/PvE gameplay, meaning you're simultaneously dealing with environmental AI threats and other human players who have their own agendas. In theory, all raiders have a common enemy in ARC and a shared goal of gathering resources to support Speranza. In practice, human nature and game design incentives create an environment where betrayal is common, trust is a calculated gamble, and paranoia is justified. Here's how it works. You spawn into a map along with other raiders, anywhere from solo players to three-person squads. Solo queuing generally places you with other solo players, while squads have their own matchmaking pool. But this isn't guaranteed. When you encounter another raider, you face an instant decision. Do you fight them for their loot? Do you attempt cooperation? Do you ignore each other and move on? The game provides proximity, voice chat, and an emote wheel for communication. The famous "Hey Raider, don't shoot" voice line has become iconic in the community, both for genuine attempts at cooperation and for its use in betrayals. Many players report positive experiences where they teamed up with strangers to take down a tough ARC boss or shared an extraction elevator. These moments of spontaneous cooperation are genuinely special, creating organic camaraderie against the hostile world. But equally common are stories of betrayal. Raiders who cooperate for 20 minutes, looting together, fighting ARC together, bonding over voice chat, only for one player to suddenly execute the other right before extraction and take all the accumulated loot. The shotgun to the back while climbing toward the extraction elevator has become a meme in the community. The friendly, until you turn around moment, the headshot followed by an apologetic sorry over voice chat. Why does this happen? Game theory provides some answers. Every piece of loot another raider is carrying is loot you could have. Killing them is guaranteed profit if you survive. Cooperation is risky because you're trusting someone not to betray you when betraying you would benefit them. The extraction phase is particularly volatile because everyone knows the run is almost over. If you're going to betray your temporary ally, you do it right before extracting when they're least suspicious and most vulnerable. The community is genuinely divided on whether this PvP element enhances or ruins the game. Some players argue it creates essential tension, that the possibility of betrayal makes moments of real cooperation more meaningful, that the risk of losing everything to another player is what gives ARC raiders its emotional weight. They point out that extraction shooters are defined by these high-stakes player interactions. Remove the PvP, and you remove the genre's core appeal. Other players argue the PvP creates a toxic environment where new players get repeatedly camped and murdered, where progression becomes frustratingly slow because you can't keep gear long enough to learn how to use it effectively, where the social aspect devolves into kill-on-sight mentality because trust is too risky. They want a PvE-only mode or separate servers where players can focus on fighting ARC without worrying about getting backstabbed. The developers have been clear that PvP is an intentional and central part of the design. The game was originally conceived as PvE-only cooperative, but was rebuilt as PvPvE because the development team found that version more fun. The risk of player betrayal is meant to keep you on edge, to make every encounter a negotiation, to force difficult decisions. From a survival perspective, let me be blunt. Other players are the most unpredictable and often the most lethal threat you face. ARC machines have programmed behaviors. You can learn their patterns, exploit their weaknesses, develop strategies. Environmental hazards follow rules. Lightning strikes give warning. Night raids have consistent difficulty curves. But other players, they're human. They make unexpected decisions. They camp in spots that make no tactical sense just because they correctly guessed you'd come that way. They communicate with teammates through voice chat you can't hear, coordinating ambushes you can't predict. Extraction camping is particularly insidious. Some players don't even bother looting. They spawn, immediately sprint to extraction points, and wait for other raiders to arrive loaded with gear. Why spend 30 minutes risking your life scavenging when you can spend 30 minutes safely waiting for someone else to do the work, then kill them and take everything? The strategy is cowardly by community consensus, but also brutally effective. A patient camper with a good weapon can massacre multiple raiders as they arrive at extractions, accumulating huge amounts of loot with minimal risk. Sound becomes a massive factor in PvP encounters. The game features environmental noisemakers like crows that scatter when you pass, doors that creak, certain containers that make distinctive sounds when opened. Experienced raiders listen constantly for these audio cues. They track other players by sound rather than sight, waiting for you to give away your position by stepping on the wrong piece of terrain or opening a loud container. The weight system makes running away difficult. Your encumbrance, determined by how much loot you're carrying and what equipment you have equipped, affects your movement speed and stamina consumption. A raider who just spawned with minimal gear can chase you relentlessly because they're light and fast. You, loaded down with valuable loot and wearing a heavy shield, can't outrun them. The very success of your run makes you more vulnerable. And here's a psychological element that can't be overstated. The longer your run goes, the more successful you've been. The more you have to lose, the more terrified you become of losing it. Raiders report that their playstyle becomes more conservative as their backpack fills up. You take fewer risks, you avoid fights, you sneak more. Every decision is weighted against the question, is this worth risking everything I've collected? The answer is almost always no, which means you become passive and defensive, which paradoxically makes you more vulnerable because you're not taking initiative. The betrayal stories are genuinely heartbreaking in some cases. Players who spent an entire run cooperating, who revived each other after getting down by ARC, who shared loot fairly, only to have one player turn on the others at the last second. The community debates whether this is toxic behavior or legitimate gameplay. The moderators of community forums have had to clarify that while you can call someone a villain player for in-game betrayal, personal insults aren't tolerated. The distinction between criticizing someone's gameplay choices and attacking them as a person has become blurry because extraction shooter betrayals feel genuinely personal even when they're strategically rational. There's also a class dimension to the PvP that mirrors the game's lore uncomfortably well. Wealthy players, those who've already accumulated substantial resources and upgraded their workshops fully, can afford to run expensive loadouts repeatedly. They have good weapons, high-tier equipment, and can absorb losses more easily. Poor players, those struggling to progress, are running budget gear or even free loadouts because they can't afford to lose anything better. When a wealthy player kills a poor player, they're often not even getting valuable loot. They're just eliminating competition. But that poor player just lost everything they couldn't afford to lose. The in-game economy creates the same desperate survival situation that exists in the lore. The rich get richer. The poor struggle. Now let's discuss the extraction mechanics themselves, because they represent the final gauntlet, the last hurdle between you and safety, and they're deliberately designed to be the most stressful part of every run. You have 30 minutes from the moment you spawn to gather what you can and extract. The timer is always visible, always counting down, always reminding you that your window of opportunity is closing. This creates constant time pressure that affects every decision. Should you push deeper into dangerous ARC territory for better loot, or play it safe near extraction points? Should you spend time fighting that bastion guarding a supply cache, or skip it and keep moving? Every second you spend doing anything is a second closer to being forced out. When you're ready to extract, or when time is running out and you have no choice, you must reach one of several extraction points scattered across the map. These locations are marked on your map, but they're not secret. Every other raider knows where they are too. Approaching an extraction point means potentially walking into an ambush, because as discussed, extraction camping is a legitimate if despised strategy. The standard extraction method involves calling an elevator that descends from above. You activate the extraction point, which triggers a visible and audible signal that can be seen and heard by anyone nearby. There's no stealth extraction. Everyone knows someone is trying to leave. The elevator takes time to arrive, during which you're vulnerable and stationary. Once it arrives, you must stand on the platform as it ascends, completely exposed to anyone who wants to take a shot at you. The ascent takes several seconds, during which you can still be killed and your body will fall back down, making your loot available to whoever killed you. Multiple raiders can extract on the same elevator, which creates interesting dynamics. If you're extracting with strangers you've been cooperating with, this is the moment of ultimate trust. Everyone is vulnerable on that platform. One person with a shotgun could wipe the entire group and take everything. Yet many extractions happen peacefully, with multiple raiders standing awkwardly on an elevator together, weapons lowered or aimed away, silently agreeing not to ruin each other's runs in these final seconds. But not always. The number of last-second betrayals on extraction elevators has become legendary in the community. Players wait until the elevator is nearly at the top, everyone relaxed and thinking they've made it, then open fire at point-blank range. The bodies tumble back down to the surface as the betrayer rides to safety alone. It's devastating emotionally and materially. There's an alternative extraction method that's safer, but requires a rare resource. Raider hatches are hidden bunker-style exits scattered throughout maps. If you find a raider hatch key during your run, usually from killing elite ARC units or looting special containers, you can use it to access a raider hatch. These extractions are solo only, one person per hatch, and they don't broadcast your position the way standard extractions do. You use the key, open the hatch, climb down, and you're gone. No waiting, no exposure, no risk of other raiders stealing your exit. The catch is that raider hatch keys are uncommon drops, and electromagnetic storms disable all hatches, forcing you to use standard extractions regardless of whether you have a key. The game deliberately takes away your safer option during the most dangerous conditions. It's a design choice that maximizes stress and player interaction, ensuring that even if you planned ahead and secured a key, you might still be forced into the extraction elevator gauntlet. There is one small mercy in the extraction mechanics, and it's called the safe pocket. Your character has a limited safe pocket inventory, separate from your main backpack, where you can stash a small amount of loot that you'll keep even if you die. The safe pocket can hold maybe 2 or 3 items depending on their size. This means that even a completely failed run where you get killed before extracting isn't total loss. Whatever you put in your safe pocket is guaranteed safe. This creates interesting strategic decisions. Do you put your rarest item in the safe pocket immediately when you find it, ensuring you keep it no matter what? Or do you keep the safe pocket empty so you can quickly stash something if you suddenly get ambushed, using those precious seconds while you're getting shot to at least save one valuable thing? Players develop personal systems. Some never touch their safe pocket until the last 5 minutes. Others use it constantly, swapping items in and out based on changing circumstances. But let's be clear. The safe pocket doesn't save your run. It saves a tiny fraction of what you collected. If you spent 30 minutes looting, filled your backpack with resources, blueprints, components, and crafting materials, and then got killed right before extraction, you might keep one blueprint in your safe pocket. The other 90% of your haul is gone. The person who killed you takes it. Or if you died to ARC, your corpse lies on the surface until it despawns, taking your loot with it. Either way, most of your progress is erased. Death in ARC raiders isn't just losing a life and respawning. It's economic devastation. Every piece of gear you brought into the run, your weapon, your shield, your equipped items, all of it can be lost. The game does have an insurance system where you can pay a fee before deploying to guarantee you get your loadout back if you die. But the insurance cost is substantial. And insurance doesn't cover anything you found during the run, only what you brought in. So you're still losing all the loot you collected. This creates a brutal negative feedback loop for struggling players. You go in with budget gear because that's all you can afford. You die because your budget gear isn't good enough to handle the threats you encounter. You lose the budget gear. Now you have even less and must go in with worse gear or even free default loadouts. You die again because you're even more underpowered. The cycle continues until you either get lucky with a successful run that jumpstarts your economy or you quit in frustration. Meanwhile, successful players who consistently extract are accumulating massive wealth. They're upgrading their workshops, unlocking better crafting recipes, running high-tier gear that makes future runs easier, which generates more wealth, which funds even better gear. The gap between rich and poor raiders grows exponentially, creating the exact class divide that exists in the game's lore. Now let's talk about the survival mechanics that supposedly help you stay alive, but really just add more ways to die from something you weren't paying attention to. Stamina is your most important resource and it depletes constantly. Running consumes stamina. Jumping consumes stamina. Climbing consumes stamina. Melee attacks consume stamina. You can't sprint if you're out of stamina. You can't jump if you're out of stamina. You move at a vulnerable slow walk if you're out of stamina. And stamina regenerates slowly, especially if you're overweight from carrying too much loot. The problem is that combat and exploration both require constant stamina expenditure. You're sprinting to reach cover during firefights. You're jumping over obstacles. You're climbing up to elevated positions or down into valleys. Every action drains that stamina bar, and if it empties at the wrong moment, you're dead. Imagine being chased by another raider, sprinting desperately toward an extraction point, and your stamina runs out 50 meters from safety. You slow to a crawl. They catch up and kill you, all because you jumped over one too many rocks earlier and didn't let your stamina fully recover. Weight management is directly tied to stamina. The more you're carrying, the faster stamina drains and the slower it regenerates. A successful run where you're loaded with loot is also a run where you can barely move quickly. You must constantly make decisions about what to carry. That rare blueprint is valuable, but it's also heavy. Do you drop some crafting materials to make room and reduce weight? But those materials are needed for upgrades. Everything has opportunity cost and everything makes you more vulnerable. Health and shield mechanics add another layer of complexity. You have health, which is your actual life total, and shields, which absorb damage first. Shields regenerate automatically after not taking damage for a few seconds. Health does not regenerate unless you use healing items. This means that in prolonged engagements, your shields might break and regenerate multiple times, but any health damage is semi-permanent until you use a medkit. The confusion comes from visual feedback. Your screen doesn't clearly differentiate between shield damage and health damage in the heat of combat. You're taking hits, your screen is flashing red, and you think you're fine because your shields keep coming back, but actually your health is getting chipped away underneath. Then you take what should be a survivable hit, and you just die because your health was lower than you realized. Many new players report dying unexpectedly because they misunderstood their actual health status. Healing items are limited and valuable. Medkits take time to use, during which you're vulnerable and can't shoot back. Using a medkit in combat is risky. Not using a medkit means staying at low health, which is also risky. You must find safe moments to heal, but safe moments are rare in a game where threats are constant. And if you use all your healing items during the run, you have nothing for the final push to extraction, meaning one bad encounter can end you with no recovery option. Crafting and resource gathering are essential for long-term progression, but they slow you down in the moment. You find crafting materials scattered throughout the map, metal scraps, electronic components, biological samples, and numerous other resource types. These materials are used to craft equipment, ammunition, and consumables back in Speranza, or to upgrade your workshop facilities for better crafting options. But gathering resources takes time. You must approach each resource node, interact with it, wait for the gathering animation, then move on. If you're thorough about gathering every resource you see, you're spending significant time standing still in dangerous areas. Other raiders can hear gathering sounds and track you by them. ARC patrols might path right into you while you're harvesting a plant. The act of collecting the materials you need to survive is itself dangerous. Crafting good equipment requires substantial material investment and unlocked blueprints. Blueprints are rare drops from elite enemies, high-value containers, or challenging locations. Each blueprint teaches you how to craft a specific weapon, equipment piece, or consumable. But just having the blueprint isn't enough. You need the materials, and you need workshop upgrades to craft higher-tier items. A new player might find a blueprint for an excellent weapon, but lack the workshop level to craft it, turning that exciting drop into a source of frustration. The skill tree system is massive and requires enormous investment to make meaningful progress. Skills are divided into trees like combat, utility, and engineering. Each skill point you earn through successful extractions and challenges can be invested in these trees to unlock passive bonuses and active abilities. The problem is that good builds require deep investment into specific trees. Early skill points feel nearly meaningless because the powerful abilities are locked 20 or 30 points deep. You're playing for dozens of hours before your character feels meaningfully stronger than when you started. This creates another advantage for veteran players. They've had time to develop their skill trees. They have access to abilities that fundamentally change combat effectiveness. A veteran with full combat tree investment can survive engagements that would instantly kill a new player, not because of player skill necessarily, but because they have passive bonuses to health, shield capacity, weapon damage, and reload speed that newer players simply don't have access to yet. The mechanical skill ceiling combines with the progression system to create an enormous gulf between veterans and newcomers. And here's something that makes all of this worse. The game has no matchmaking based on skill or progression. A brand new player deploying for their first ever run can be matched against a 3-person squad of veterans with hundreds of hours, fully upgraded gear, and complete skill trees. There's no protection for new players, no training wheels. You're thrown into the deep, end immediately, and expected to either learn to swim very quickly or drown repeatedly until you give up. The community is torn on this design choice. Hardcore players argue that fair matchmaking would ruin the extraction shooter experience. That part of the genre's appeal is the unpredictability, that everyone started at zero and had to struggle through the same learning curve. Casual players counter that the learning curve is so steep and punishing that most newcomers quit before they ever have a chance to get established, and that a healthier long-term player base requires some protection for beginners. Regardless of the debate, the reality for you as a new raider is stark. You're going to die. A lot. You're going to lose gear you couldn't afford to lose. You're going to get killed by ARC because you didn't know about the weak points. You're going to get ambushed by other raiders who've memorized every hiding spot on every map. You're going to run out of stamina at the worst possible moment. You're going to mismanage your inventory and bring the wrong equipment. You're going to make it to extraction with amazing loot, only to get sniped off the elevator at the last second. These aren't possibilities. They're inevitabilities. The game is designed to make you fail repeatedly. Each death teaches you something, sure, but the tuition for those lessons is paid in lost time and lost resources. Now, let's discuss the psychological warfare that ARC Raiders inflicts on players, because the mechanical challenges are only part of why you wouldn't survive. The mental and emotional toll is equally devastating. Paranoia becomes your constant companion. Every sound could be an enemy. Every shadow could be another raider. That distant gunfire means combat happening somewhere, but is it moving toward you or away? Should you investigate and potentially third-party the fight for easy kills and loot, or avoid it and stay safe? Every decision carries risk, and every decision requires you to evaluate threats you can't fully see or understand. The game's audio design deliberately cultivates this paranoia. Footsteps are directional and volume adjusted, meaning you can hear someone approaching, but you might not know exactly where they are. Environmental sounds like wind, distant machine noises, and ambient electrical hums mask important audio cues, making you constantly question whether you heard something real or just background noise. Raiders report developing acute anxiety around sound, constantly removing their headphones to verify whether a noise was in-game or in their actual house. Crows and other wildlife are particularly insidious. These creatures scatter when anything approaches, raiders or ARC. So when you hear crows taking flight nearby, something is there, but you don't know what. Is it a harmless tick, a deadly bastion, another raider sneaking toward your position? The crows don't tell you. They just tell you that you're not alone. The game uses environmental wildlife as a psychological weapon, keeping you constantly on edge without giving you enough information to act decisively. The sound of AR scanners is perhaps the most distinctive and terrifying audio in the game. That electronic hum of a machine actively searching for targets makes your heart rate spike even when you're confident you're hidden. When the scanner sound gets louder, meaning the ARC is getting closer, your decision space collapses. Do you stay hidden and hope it passes? Do you reposition to maintain distance? Do you prepare to fight? The scanner sound forces you to make choices under pressure, and pressure creates mistakes. Proximity voice chat adds another dimension to the psychological game. Hearing another raider's voice, knowing there's a real human player nearby, fundamentally changes the encounter. They might call out friendly greetings, they might ask for cooperation, they might say nothing and you just hear their breathing or background noise. Some players use voice strategically, chatting casually to seem non-threatening right up until the moment they betray you. Others stay completely silent, which is somehow more threatening because you can't gauge their intentions. The community has developed call-outs and common phrases. Hey Raider, don't shoot has already been mentioned, but there's also friendly, I'm just looting here, want to team up against ARC, and various other negotiation attempts. The problem is that words mean nothing in a game where betrayal is profitable. Someone can sound genuine and still be planning to kill you. Voice chat becomes a poker game where everyone is bluffing and nobody knows who has the real cards. Then there's the psychological impact of loss aversion. Behavioral economics tells us that humans feel losses more intensely than equivalent gains. Losing 100,000 credits worth of loot feels worse than gaining 100,000 credits feels good. ARC Raiders exploits this cognitive bias ruthlessly. Every successful run makes you feel good, sure, but every failed run feels devastating. The negative emotional impact of deaths outweighs the positive emotional impact of extractions, which means the game feels punishing even if you're winning more often than losing. This loss aversion changes player behavior in observable ways. As mentioned earlier, raiders become more conservative as their backpacks fill up. You start taking fewer risks. You avoid fights you might win. You spend more time hiding and less time actively playing. The most successful raiders report forcing themselves to maintain aggression even when loaded with loot, because playing scared makes you predictable and vulnerable. But fighting against your own psychological instincts requires conscious effort and emotional discipline that's genuinely exhausting. The addiction loop is also worth examining. ARC Raiders is designed to keep you coming back despite how much it hurts you. Every run has the potential to be the big score, the amazing extraction where you find multiple blueprints and rare materials that jumpstart your progression. This variable ratio reinforcement schedule, the same psychological mechanism that makes gambling addictive, keeps you queuing for one more run even after a string of failures. You tell yourself that the next run will be different. You learn from your mistakes. You'll be more careful. You'll get lucky with spawns and loot. And sometimes you do succeed, which validates the belief that persistence pays off, which makes you more willing to endure future failures. The game becomes a cycle of pain and occasional reward that's genuinely difficult to break away from even when you're not having fun anymore. Community stories reinforce both the highs and lows. Reddit threads and Discord channels are filled with tales of incredible extractions where someone made millions in a single run, and equally filled with tales of devastating losses where someone lost everything they'd accumulated over weeks of play. These stories set expectations and create social pressure. You want to have your own success story to share. You don't want to be the person who quits because the game was too hard. Social dynamics push you to keep playing even when the experience is more stressful than enjoyable. The developers understand these psychological mechanisms and design systems that intensify them. Weekly trials offer time-limited rewards, creating urgency and FOMO, fear of missing out. Limited-time events provide exclusive loot that won't be available later, pressuring you to play during specific windows, even if you're busy or burned out. Seasonal progression systems reset periodically, erasing part of your progress and forcing you to grind again to maintain status. All of these systems leverage psychological pressure to maximize player engagement, which is great for player retention numbers, but potentially harmful to actual player well-being. And let's address something darker. ARC Raiders can genuinely damage your mental health if you're not careful. The constant stress, the repeated losses, the betrayals by other players, the feeling that you're falling behind while others succeed, these things accumulate. Players report increased anxiety around the game, trouble sleeping after particularly bad sessions, anger management issues when dealing with betrayals, and genuine depression when they feel their time investment is worthless because they keep losing everything they work toward. The game doesn't care about your mental health. It's designed to be engaging and challenging, not supportive and therapeutic. There's no system to detect when a player is spiraling and suggest they take a break. There's no matchmaking protection for players on losing streaks. There's no psychological safety net. You're responsible for managing your own emotional response to repeated virtual failure, and not everyone is equipped to do that effectively. Some players develop genuinely unhealthy relationships with the game. They play compulsively, even when they're not enjoying it, chasing the high of successful extractions like addicts chasing their next fix. They neglect other responsibilities to grind for progression. They spend money on cosmetics or battle passes to feel some sense of advancement when their actual gameplay progression stalls. They get genuinely angry at other players for playing the game as designed, treating in-game betrayals as personal attacks. None of this means ARC Raiders is bad or shouldn't exist. Many players thrive in this environment. They love the challenge. They enjoy the psychological warfare. They find the risk-reward calculation genuinely thrilling. For these players, the stress isn't a bug, it's a feature. The game delivers exactly the experience they're seeking, and they're happy to pay the emotional price for the highs it provides. But if you're asking whether you specifically would survive a day in this environment, both the fictional world and the gameplay experience, The honest answer is probably not. The mechanical skill required is substantial. The game knowledge required is extensive. The emotional resilience required is significant. The time investment required is enormous. You need all of these elements, skill and knowledge and resilience and time, to succeed consistently. Missing any one of them makes success nearly impossible. Consider what a single day in Ark Raiders actually means in practical terms. You wake up in Speranza, in your cramped underground quarters where artificial lighting poorly imitates natural sunlight you haven't seen in years. The air tastes recycled, the walls are close. Everyone around you is desperate in their own way, hiding it behind merchant smiles and casual banter. You gear up with whatever equipment you can afford, knowing that if you lose it today, you might not be able to replace it. You take the gravity lift to the surface, emerging into a poisoned wasteland that used to be part of the Italian countryside. The sky is the wrong color. The air smells wrong. Everything is simultaneously too quiet because nature is dead and too loud because ARC machines hum and click in the distance. You have 30 minutes to gather enough resources to justify the risk, to support the community, to advance your own survival. Within minutes, you hear scanner sounds. An ARC patrol is nearby. Do you hide? Fight? Run? You make a choice and maybe it's the right one and you survive, or maybe it's wrong and you die before you've collected anything worthwhile. If you survive the first encounter, there will be another, and another, until either you're dead or you're extraction bound with your heart pounding and your hands shaking because you know you're not safe until you're back underground. And during all of this, other raiders are out there making the same calculations. Some might genuinely want cooperation. Others are actively hunting you for sport and profit. You have no way to know which until it's too late. Trust is a luxury you can't afford, but paranoia is exhausting. You're trapped between two bad options with no good solution. Let's say, miraculously, you extract successfully. You made it back to Speranza with valuable loot. You're not safe yet because your body and mind are wrecked. Your hands are shaking from adrenaline. Your heart is still racing. You're replaying moments where you almost died, calculating what you could have done differently, wondering if the raider who waved friendly at you was genuinely friendly or just didn't have a good shot. You won this time, but you know you have to do it again tomorrow and the next day and every day after because underground resources are finite and topside is the only option. How many days can you maintain that level of stress? How many times can you stare death in the face before your luck runs out? How many betrayals can you experience before you stop trusting anyone? How many times can you lose everything before the psychological damage becomes permanent? The answer, for most people, is not many. Human beings aren't designed for this level of sustained threat. We're remarkably good at handling acute stress, at making split-second decisions when our lives depend on it, at pushing through dangerous situations when we have to. But we're not built for chronic stress, for living in a constant state of danger where the threats never end and the pressure never releases. That kind of existence breaks people. It broke most of humanity in the game's lore, survivors of the collapse and the ARC invasions who gave up, who stopped venturing topside, who just waited to die in the underground darkness because fighting seemed pointless. The raiders who do survive long-term, both in the game's fiction and in actual player statistics, are exceptional outliers. They're the ones with perfect mechanical execution, with comprehensive map knowledge, with the psychological fortitude to shrug off losses and keep pushing forward. They're the natural athletes of extraction shooters, the people whose brains are wired to thrive in competitive high-pressure environments. They're not normal. Normal people wash out. Normal people don't survive. And even the exceptional raiders don't survive forever. The top-tier players with thousands of hours still die. They still lose gear. They still get outplayed or unlucky. The best player in the world can be killed by a worse player who got a better spawn location. Skill and knowledge and resilience increase your survival rate, but they don't guarantee survival. Nothing guarantees survival in ARC Raiders except not playing. So why do people play? Why subject yourself to this nightmare? The answers vary by person, but common themes emerge. Some players genuinely enjoy the challenge, the knowledge that success means something because failure is costly. Some love the emergent narratives, the stories that develop from player interactions and close calls. Some find the PvP/PvE format uniquely engaging compared to more scripted experiences. Some are simply addicted to the high-stakes gambling of each run. But perhaps the most interesting answer is that ARC Raiders provide something rare in modern gaming: meaningful consequences. In most games, death is an inconvenience. You respawn and try again with no real loss. But in ARC Raiders, and in extraction shooters generally, death matters. Loss matters. The stakes are real within the game's economy and progression systems. This makes success feel earned in a way that easier games don't provide. When you successfully extract with millions in loot, you feel accomplished because you know what you risked to get it. That sense of meaningful accomplishment is psychologically powerful and increasingly rare in a world where most systems are designed to make you feel good, regardless of actual achievement. ARC Raiders doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't hand you participation trophies. It doesn't protect you from failure. It's brutally honest about your performance. And for some personalities, that honesty is refreshing and valuable even when it hurts. Yet we must return to the original question. Would you survive a day in ARC Raiders? Not as a hypothetical player with infinite time to learn and improve, but as you right now, with your current skill level, available time, and psychological makeup. The world itself would kill most people instantly. The toxic air, the contaminated water, the lack of proper food, the psychological toll of living underground in cramped conditions, the knowledge that humanity is on the verge of extinction, these things would break your spirit before you ever faced a machine. The survivors in Speranza are traumatized shells of human beings who've learned to function despite constant despair. They've adapted to horror. You haven't. Assuming you somehow adapted to the underground existence, the surface would kill you on your first deployment. You don't know the map layouts. You can't identify ARC units by sound. You haven't memorized spawn locations or patrol paths. You don't know which containers have good loot or which areas are death traps. You're ignorant of everything that experienced raiders know instinctively, and that ignorance is lethal. Even if you somehow survived your first encounters through sheer luck, you'd eventually face another raider, and they'd have no reason to spare you. Maybe they'd kill you for your loot. Maybe they'd kill you just because you're a potential threat. Maybe they'd let you pass, but you'd never know whether to trust them, and the paranoia alone would impair your decision-making in future encounters. And even if you achieved some impossible streak of good fortune and successfully extracted once, you'd have to do it again. And again. The game is designed for repeated deployment, for grinding through dozens of runs to make meaningful progression. One successful extraction doesn't establish you. It's just a single data point in a long-term survival equation where the probabilities eventually catch up to everyone. The statistics are damning. Even experienced players maintain maybe a 30 to 40% extraction rate in the current testing phases, meaning that 60 to 70% of their runs end in death. These are players with hundreds of hours of experience, with fully upgraded gear, with developed skill trees, with comprehensive game knowledge, and they still die more often than they survive. What chance would you have? Zero. The answer is zero. You wouldn't survive a day because the game is designed to kill you, the world is designed to kill you, the other players are motivated to kill you, and the environment itself is lethal. Survival in ORC Raiders isn't a reasonable expectation. It's an exceptional achievement that requires dedication, skill, knowledge, and luck in equal measure. But here's the beautiful tragedy of it all. Despite knowing you wouldn't survive, despite understanding intellectually that the game is designed to cause you pain, despite seeing all the ways it would break you physically and psychologically, part of you probably wants to try anyway. The human spirit has this stubborn refusal to accept impossibility. We see impossible challenges and think maybe, just maybe, we'd be different, we'd be special, we'd be the one who makes it. That's why ARC Raiders works as both a game and a setting. It taps into something primal in human nature, our drive to survive against overwhelming odds, our competitive instinct to prove ourselves, our need to test our limits. The game tells you it will destroy you, and something in your brain responds, that's exactly why I want to try. So no, you wouldn't survive a day in ARC Raiders. But you'd probably queue up for that run anyway, hoping that maybe this time would be different, maybe this would be the run where everything clicked and you pulled off the impossible. And the game would kill you, and you'd respawn in Speranza with less than you started with, and you'd look at the gravity lift and think about going again. Because that's what raiders do. They risk everything, repeatedly, despite knowing the odds. They're not explorers anymore, as Celeste calls them. They're part junkies, part maniacs, addicted to the rush of cheating death one more time. And in a world where humanity is already lost, where Earth is a graveyard and the rich abandoned everyone else to die, maybe the small act of defiance, of choosing to fight against impossible odds rather than accepting slow death underground, maybe that means something. Or maybe it's just a game that exploits psychological vulnerabilities to maximize engagement. Both things can be true simultaneously. The world of ARC raiders is fascinating in its bleakness, compelling in its hostility, and brutally honest about human nature when resources are scarce and survival is uncertain. It holds a mirror up to extraction shooter. Players and asks, are you willing to hurt repeatedly for small moments of triumph? Are you willing to lose more than you win? Are you capable of maintaining emotional equilibrium when virtual possessions you've invested hours obtaining disappear in seconds? For most people, across both the game's fiction and its player base, the answer is no. Most can't or won't do what's required. They die in the fiction, consumed by machines or by the environment or by other desperate humans. They quit in reality, deciding that the stress outweighs the entertainment value. And there's no shame in either outcome. Extraction shooters are niche precisely because most people don't find them fun. ARC Raiders asks more of players than most games do, and it's entirely reasonable to decide you're not willing to pay that price. But for those who stay, for those who keep deploying despite the pain, ARC Raiders offers something unique. It offers genuine stakes in a world of low-consequence entertainment. It offers unpredictable human drama in a world of scripted narratives. It offers hard-won victories in a world of automatic progression. It offers, paradoxically, authentic experience in a virtual space. You still wouldn't survive a day there. But now you understand why, and maybe that understanding helps you appreciate the raiders who do survive, whether fictional characters like Celeste and Apollo who've carved out existence in impossible circumstances, or real players who've mastered the brutal mechanics and learned to thrive in the chaos. If you've made it this far in the video, if you've stuck with me through this exhaustive examination of why ARC Raiders would absolutely destroy you, then congratulations. You've survived my video, which is more than you'd survive in the actual game. But seriously, I appreciate you taking this journey with me through one of gaming's most hostile and unforgiving worlds. If you enjoyed this deep dive into ARC Raiders lore, mechanics, and the psychological warfare it inflicts on players, do me a favor and hit that like button. It helps the algorithm understand that people want detailed, comprehensive lore analysis rather than surface-level content. And if you want more videos exploring the stories, worlds, and characters that make gaming special, subscribe to All About the Lore. We go deep on game lore, movie lore, comic lore, and theories about fictional universes, all delivered in this relaxed conversational style. Drop a comment letting me know what you'd like to see covered next. What game world should I explore? What character story should I tell? What lore rabbit hole should I dive down? Your suggestions directly influence what content gets made, so speak up. And if you're actually playing ARC Raiders or planning to once it launches, I'd love to hear your survival stories or spectacular failure stories in the comments. Have you pulled off an impossible extraction? Have you been betrayed in a particularly creative way? Did you learn something from this video that you didn't know before? Share your experiences with the community. Thanks for watching, and remember, in ARC Raiders, survival isn't the goal because survival is impossible. The goal is to die with style, to make your inevitable death mean something, to extract enough times that your eventual permanent demise was worth the struggle. Stay safe out there, Raiders, or don't, because you're probably going to die anyway.